What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Andrew Ramon Show. Hey, I want to welcome you. If this is your first time listening, what's up? You can expect a new episode every Monday. I don't know if you knew that, but there is a new episode every single Monday. It publishes right around 12 o'clock on Mondays. And then if you're an early riser for podcast or anything audio on your favorite platform, you can listen to us pretty early. I think it comes out like at 5 a.m. So, hey, if you want to wake up at 5 and listen to it, that's great. I ain't going to do that. But that's awesome. Either way, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. This is episode number 51. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the 50th episode, we answered, and I say we, I say me. That's what I mean, is I answered your questions. So this episode is the start to I would say a series. Now, I don't know how long the series will be. I'll be honest with you. But we're going to talk about a subject that we will, in our lifetime, spend 90,000 hours doing. That is the average. Every person in their lifetime will spend 90,000 hours doing something. Can you guess? Yep, you guessed it. Working. That's how long we spend. In average in our lifetime is about 90,000 hours. Another way to put it is almost 1/3 of our life will be spent in work. Some of y'all listening right now, you're like, oh my gosh, that's me right now. I'm in my lunch break. Or maybe you're a little younger. You're like, oh, there's no way. I mean, I'm still middle school or I'm still in high school. I haven't really started working 90,000 hours. Well, baby, once you hit the grind, you start hitting the grind. This seems like a rat race, although as Christians, we don't have to participate in that rat race. And we'll talk about how in this series of episodes. So let's talk about work, shall we? It's very interesting because we're going to spend about 90,000 hours doing it. Yet we don't spend a lot of time talking about it, especially when it comes to being a Christian. How does it look like for a Christian to work? Are we supposed to work differently? Is there supposed to be something unique about a Christian at work? Or is it just something like, are we supposed to work like everybody else, right? I mean, when at least when you start becoming a Christian, you start kind of renewing your mind, right? And you start seeing the Christian perspective on many things. It can be on family, on obviously faith and religion. It can be on how you handle money or relationships. And I think it's time we talk about how you handle what you will be doing for about 90,000 hours, right? And before we get there, I always want to share my favorite drink right now, folks. That's right. I am showing off my Yellowstone National Park. Now, you might be thinking, Andrew, you showed a Yellowstone National Park. Sir, this is a different Yellowstone National Park mug. I can't keep track of the mugs I show. So if I show a mug twice, thank you for your mercy. Today, I have a brand new hibiscus tea. Now, if you didn't know, I suck at choosing teas. I actually can't choose teas very much. I'm getting educated, all right? I am fancying my taste buds, okay? They're getting more fancy. They're getting more gourmet, if I will. That's why I just feel so bougie drinking tea. You know, I feel like I should always have my pinky out. So proper. Thank you very much for my tea. So I want to tell you that our great listener gave me a whole bag of teas. That's right, because my first tea experience wasn't great. So thank you so much for the hibiscus. I'm actually liking it a lot. I don't know if you knew this, but in Spanish, this is where we get Jamaica from. That's right. El jugo de Jamaica. Oh my gosh. Jamaica juice. No, it's not made in Jamaica. Okay. Wait, I actually don't know that, but I don't think so. It's basically hibiscus tea. So I'll be drinking some hibiscus tea as we talk about work. Now, if we give our lives to Jesus, in every part of our lives, we want to submit it to the Lord and we want to involve him in everything. Shouldn't we involve him in work? But how do we do that? Is a Christian supposed to work differently? Is a Christian even supposed to work? Is a Christian only supposed to work in ministry? Is ministry more dignified than just a regular job flipping burgers? How do we answer all this? Well, to help us answer all this, we're going to be discussing a lot of elements that are brought up in an awesome book that I actually got to read recently. My job, part of our reading at our job was to read this book by pastor and theologian Timothy Keller. Where it at here? All right, Timothy Keller. It's called Every Good Endeavor. It's wrote by Timothy Keller and Catherine Leary Alsford. Did I say that right? Alsdorf. Check it out. You don't want to miss it, especially if you have felt a little bit like you have felt the meaningless sometimes of the 9 to 5 and this cycle that sometimes seems pointless. Well, they talk about this in this book, and we're really going to be taking a lot of elements from it. So I'm not obviously going to go in detail. I'm not going to plagiarize everything, boys. So you can definitely go and read it for yourself to know more details. But the authors talk about the concept of three things. One is, what did God even have a design with work? Is work a bad thing? Is work a neutral thing? Is work a necessary evil that we just have to do in the fallen world? Or is work a good thing? And again, it's the concept of work, okay? It's not like certain types of work, because obviously we live in a fallen world and some people do horrible things for work, okay? Like immoral things. So we're not talking about that. But is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Then you talk about, okay, how do you represent Jesus? Are you supposed to, does representing Jesus at work only mean that you should wear a cross or bring your Bible to work, or you should just not say cuss words? Like, how does it really look like? Well, in this episode, we're only going to tackle a little bit of it. We're going to shift our perspective. Okay, we're going to talk about the perspective of work, a biblical perspective of work, because this will then have implications of that perspective, right? Every perspective you have then has an application of that, or an implication that we then live out. So what we do 90,000 hours throughout our lives does matter. And just like we would represent Jesus in everything, and just how Jesus cares about everything, he also cares about our work. So let's give it a new perspective. In the book of Genesis, we know about the creation story. Well, something that maybe you had not thought about, and I know I didn't think about before reading this book, well, not as much at least, is creating means working. God actually worked for 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh. It's interesting that God worked. So if God worked, work can't necessarily be evil, right? Because God can't do evil. So work, wait a minute, Andrew, you're telling me that work was in the world before the fall? It sounds like it. So work wasn't like a punishment necessarily? It doesn't seem so. So Andrew, why then does work seem stressful? Why does sometimes work seem pointless and all this? Is that God's design for work? No. Don't get too ahead of yourself, because remember, we do live in the fallen world. But let's understand this new perspective, this biblical perspective. The first thing is understanding that God actually works. God is always working. You know the song, even when I can't see it, what? You're working, right? Even when I can't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. That's right. God is always working. And we learned that in the creation story in the garden, that work was before the fall, and God actually created the garden and set mankind to take care of it. That's right. So this brings up an interesting question. Is work part of our purpose? Oh gosh, no, Andrew, don't say that. Does that mean I'm supposed to work for the rest of my life? I'm supposed to work a 9 to 5. Okay. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that, but can work be part of our purpose? Now we're just probably working the wrong way. Because think about this. I talk with a lot of retired people. I do. We purchase homes, and I get to talk with a lot of older people, many of them retired. And I'd like to ask them this question. How is retirement? Well, those who are just getting into retirement, they tell me, well, it's great. I finally have time to do what I want. Those who have been in retirement for longer, and again, I'm not speaking for everybody, it tends to get boring, meaningless. You start having the sense that you don't have much purpose. You don't have what we've called a telos, something to sustain you, an end goal. Actually, Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl, with his the therapy that he created, right? What did he call that? He called it the ethos therapy. You can read that in Man's Search for Meaning. And it's just great therapy that he created. Well, maybe he didn't create, but he put together and has helped people find meaning. One is through work. Work helps people find meaning. I remember I was at the hotel one day, and this older gentleman, again, and I say older gentleman to be respectful but he was like a grandpa, right? And he came to the front and he was looking for an application to work. I'm saying, for your grandson or who wants to work? He said, no, I want to work. I had to ask him. I said, oh, well, that's great. Well, what brings you to ask for an application? He said, well, I'm retired and I'm bored. Isn't that funny? So many people work so that they work so hard so that they don't have to work. Yet this person retires and now says they're bored and wants to work again. What in the world? Could it be that maybe work is part of our purpose? You see, author Tim Keller says this in the book. It's fascinating. He says this: to see work in our DNA, meaning our design, is part of what it means to grasp the distinct Christian understanding of freedom. See, when we shift our perspective and we see work as part of our DNA, not part of as a punishment, but part of our DNA, what God has called us to do. Think about this. God rested for one day and worked for 6 days. Fascinating. He worked for 6, rested for one. He gave us the blueprint of work. He actually set the day. He set the week in motion, and he said, "Work 6 days and rest 1." Oh gosh, sometimes I'm like, God, couldn't you have worked 1 day and rested 6? Sometimes don't you feel that like that some weeks? But interestingly enough, God sets up 1 day for rest and 6 days for work, which I think means work is pretty important. But a lot of times we come from the rat race, if you will, and we feel that work is a necessary evil we just have to do to enjoy the rest of our lives, and I just don't like to work, and et cetera, et cetera. And we feel like constrained, like we all as humans, we want freedom, right? We feel as if work is like the jailer holding the keys. And if we work hard enough, he might give us the keys for our freedom. If we work hard enough, we might retire and finally feel free. But as author Tim Keller said, understanding that work is part of our DNA is understanding the Christian definition of freedom. I'm going to quote him again. This is fascinating. Listen closely. He says this. Okay, here we go. He said, the same is true with airplanes. So right now he's talking about, in order to know what freedom is, in order for something to properly function to the best of its ability, you have to know what it's called to do and what it's part of its DNA. So for example, he said, the same is true with airplanes and birds. If they violate the laws of aerodynamics, they will crash into the ground. But if they follow them, they will ascend and soar. Listen to this carefully. The same is true in many areas of life. Freedom is not so much the absence of restrictions as finding the right ones, those that fit with the realities of our own nature and those of the world. Did you hear that definition of freedom? Freedom is not so much the absence of restrictions, the absence of work, the absence of responsibility, as more as finding the right ones. For those that fit with the realities of our own what? Our own nature, our own DNA. See, when we understand our human nature, that work is part of us, then we can finally start understanding what freedom actually looks like. You can't actually be fulfilled right now working. That's crazy. So many people say, "Oh, work is just part of it." Oh gosh, I just have to work, but I'm looking to get out of here. Especially, in the hotel business that I work in. You see some people working, it's just like monotonous, right? It's like boring. It looks like a prison sentence. But God actually called us to be fulfilled in the work that he's given us. Now, again, I'm talking about the concept of work is a good thing. Now, what does that mean? When we start thinking that the very concept of work is God-given, it's a good thing. It was before the fall. Now, again, it's been twisted. Now it's fruitless. And we're going to talk about that in later episodes. But I encourage you to shift your perspective. Don't see work as the world sees it, as a necessary evil or it's just something neutral. But now it becomes a gift. That's amazing. That helps us be grateful. Now I'm grateful when I have work. Yeah, it might not be the best. Yeah, it's tiresome and all that. And yeah, but life is hard, right? As we keep saying over and over, choose your hard. But now I can be grateful because it's a gift. But it has some implications. It has some positive implications. When we understand that work is not necessarily a necessary evil, but it's actually a gift from God, then work dignifies a person. This is interesting, and the author makes a great observation here. You see, sometimes work can actually dignify someone, or it can, I guess, undignify someone, right? Society tends to look at a janitor with downcasted eyes, look down upon a janitor, but look up to a CEO. It said, "Oh, a janitor. Oh, you don't want to be a janitor. Low life. Oh, CEO, I want to be a CEO." Or, "Oh, a philosopher must be better than someone who mops the floors." This is the way the world works. The world works through a caste system of different classes. India obviously has an official caste system, but the whole world works through classes of what is more dignified work than the other one. But as believers, that no longer applies. Because if work is a necessary evil, then some works are more necessary evil than others, and some works have less value, and flipping burgers is not as dignifying. Again, I'm trying not to use the word valuable, because valuable you can think of like, well, sometimes if you do the work of cleaning your room, it might not be that valuable to the world as, inventing a cure. Okay, I get that part, but I'm using the word dignifying. That means that no matter what work you have dignity. Don't look down upon a job. Society wants to tell you that, you have to get started, and you have to get started at a high-paying job, and you have to get started with respect. No. You have to understand that all work is dignifying. And again, the concept of work, because obviously you can do jobs that are not dignifying because they're immoral or they're unethical and all these things. So I'm not talking about that. I'm saying the concept of work, the bricklayer to the philosopher who wrote a book, not one than the other is more dignifying than the other. Remember that the Greeks and the Romans, whenever they talked about their gods, it was like the philosophers. The philosophers were somehow closer to the gods than the average citizen. In fact, that's why people put down and said, the philosopher is greater than the slave. But remember who Jesus came as. He came as a carpenter. He didn't come as a theologian necessarily. He didn't come as sitting on a high horse. No, he came as a carpenter because he wanted to show us that no matter what job you have the dignity, and there is value in who you are as a human being. So what are the practical applications from this? When we understand and start shifting our perspective that work is not a necessary evil, is not even evil, the very concept of work was in the garden, and it was designed by God to give us purpose. Now, again, it's not ultimate purpose, but it is purpose. This is why many retired people, I've spoken to them myself, feel pointless without work. Many, take a look at the welfare program. This has happened a lot of times when the welfare program goes bad, is when the government basically just hands you a check and there's no motivation to work. And I've met many families like that, and there's no purpose to life. You stop working, and many times you stop living. Again, there's a balance to everything, right? You're not supposed to be a workaholic, and that's all possible, etc. But God has given us work as a gift. When you understand that, the very idea of work is that the dignity of work is the same no matter what. If you're flipping burgers, if you're just helping your teacher and you're in middle school, you haven't worked yet, if you're at Brahms and just making ice cream, or if you're writing a book, you're a philosopher, you're a professor, you're a scientist, you made the cure, that's one is not more dignifying than the other. They're both dignifying because you're honoring God. Now, in the following episodes, we're going to talk about how did all this go wrong? Why is work sometimes fruitless? Why is it frustrating? And how can we make it better? And what does it truly mean to work as a Christian? So you don't want to miss the next episode of The Andrew Roman Show.